Hello everyone, this is the great Lord and Master Osiron, the Eternal, for what should be a pretty amazing video, I think. What this is going to be Fibonacci in the single-digit code. Now, this concept of Fibonacci is nothing new, obviously, and there is a code that is created by Fibonacci, and there's two ways people do it. Okay, there's a way that as you extend the numbers of Fibonacci, there's some people who just keep the last number of any number that's produced, and that produces a code of 60. Every 60 it produces a repeatable code. But the way I do it, in the way with the single digit code, is to reduce all the numbers to their lowest number, and then you use that. And what happens when you do that, when you reduce all the numbers, like in vortex math or anything else, the single digit code, what happens when you do that is it produces its own code, but it's not based on 60 anymore. It's the root code before any processing is 24 digits, okay? But once you filter it through the vortex math wheel, and I'll show you how that happens in a minute, it produces a code of 12. And what that code is what I call the pulse of creation. That is 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, and then back to 0. And from this 0 to the beginning of the next 0 is 12 spaces. And you can see it jumps from a 0, it builds up like a wave, produces a 1, and then descends like a wave back to 0. That's why I call this the pulse of creation. And how this is derived is over here on the end, you're going to see a bunch of columned numbers. Now, you're probably not going to be able to read these, unless you can zoom in on it. But what the code is, when you reduce the numbers of Fibonacci, what you get is a code of 24 digits. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 4, 3, 7, 1, 8, 9, 8, 8, 7, 6, 4, 1, 5, 6, 2, 8, 1, 9. And that is 24 digits. And so what you do to get this code from that is you take these numbers and you filter them through the vortex math wheel, okay? So in the case of 0, that's 0, but there is no 0, 0 is 9, but in the case of 1, 1, what that means is there's 0 movement. 1 and 1 is 0 movement, okay, on the wheel. And we see this pop up in incremental segments in this code here. There's actually a bunch of columns that I'll explain a little bit more in a few seconds, but I just want to show you how this is derived. And it's derived by filtering this string of numbers through its movements on the vortex math wheel, following the shortest path. So in the case of 1, 1, 1, 1 is 0 movement, and then 1 to 2 is 1 movement, and then 2 to 3 is 2 movements, and 3 to 5 is 3 movements, and 5 to 8 is 4 movements, and so on and on and on. And that's how this code is derived. But the reason I specified it takes the shortest path, because what happens in the creation is it just doesn't go forward. It's going forward and backwards. And what it actually does is pulses through this code twice in 124 sequence, but it does its exact mirror opposite while it does it. As an example, down here you'll see the code again of 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 0, and there's a bunch of zeros and x's on the top and bottom. Well, in this case, the x means forward motion on the vortex math wheel, and the 0 represents backward motion on the vortex math wheel. So how it starts out, and there's also, I'm not sure if you can see them, but there's two little dots between the end X and O and this X and O, because that signifies 0 movement on, that shows this 1 and 1 or the 8 and 8. That's what's going on by that dot. So there's no movement for that in any direction at that point. So it goes X, then a dot, and then X, X, X. Then it goes 0, 0, X, X, 0, X, dot, then 0. And then it repeats again, 0, dot, 0, 0, 0, X, X, 0, 0, X, 0, dot, and then X. And that forms a complete mirror of the previous code. So it goes through 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 0 twice in a sequence of the 24 numbers produced by the Fibonacci code when you reduce the numbers. So that's what happens. Okay? Now, what happens, now the reason there's a bunch of numbers going up and down, there's a couple things that happen with that code that are amazing. And as you can see from this is, the title of this is the 72 Immortals. And I'll explain what this construct is in a few minutes. This is pretty amazing. But if you take the code, the string of numbers going one way, and then you take the same exact code and build it going the opposite direction, going up alongside the other way, and then you add the numbers and reduce them, it produces its own powerful, distinct code. It produces a series of numbers that go 9, 2, 9, 4, 9, 1, 9, 8, 9, 5, 9, 7, 9, 7, 9, 5, 9, 8, 9, 1, 9, 4, 9, then 2 and 9. As you'll notice, when you do that, every other number in that string of numbers is a 9. And what you're going to see here is, you'll see a 72 and a 27, and that looks just like the center of the Kundalini grid mandala that I explained in that video. Okay? But what that is, in the middle of this, you'll see what I put is in X9, and that is just a code so I would remember to talk about it. And that means in between the 9s. And you can see the fractalization happen of this. See the greater construct, you can see a 9 here. You see, there's several rows that will only be 9, 0, or 9. That's the top, the dead center with all 9s, and then the bottoms will be either 9, 0, or 9. Those are the only rows that do that, and they're incrementally spaced. You know, they take 12 digits. You know, because each unit will be a 9 and then a string of numbers, then the next unit starts with a 9 and a string, and then it goes on to infinity. So it's based on 12 units. But what happens with all the numbers that are in between any given 9, as I just showed, that every number in between those is a number 2, and what happens is, if you take all of these string of numbers between the 9s, the number total is 11, okay? The total for the numbers is 11, and then 2 times 11, because it takes 2 sequences through the code to produce the whole, is 22, and you'll see that over here. But if you add up all those numbers between the 9s, it comes to 72, okay? But now, if you take all the numbers that are in between the smaller 9s here, they add to 27. So it's showing you the center of the Kundalini grid mandala, which I had that up here too, but it's showing you the center of the Kundalini grid mandala between the numbers that these two columns produce. And those two columns are only the forward and backward motion of the same code produced by Fibonacci that extends to infinity. Okay? So that's what happens when you do that. And as we have seen in my other videos, I have several videos that show the two-way stream action dynamic of several of these constructs, that they work in a two-way stream, going forward and backwards. And this is what this is doing. Now, the beauty of this is one string of code, again, is 24 numbers. If you break it in half at the seam here, and you feed it back onto itself, this is what this last red column over here is, and then when you do that and feed it into itself, every single number reduces and cancels to 9. So we're seeing the power again of the divine 9 in this construct. This is why I like using the reduced method better, because what happens with the reduced method of Fibonacci is it fractalizes out to, it can be a single unit of 12, or it can extend to 30 units to 360, and it can do anything. The 60 way isn't as versatile. The 60 way is limited to 60 as a code, whereas this is 24 in a code. So, and it reveals a lot more to go with it too. This is, you know, truly synchronous with the single digit code. Because what happens when you use it the other way, the other code of 60, what it does is it forms a wheel from beginning to end, okay, in its 60 units. And what happens is every opposing number, so if you take, like in this little diagram here, what I show you is just the first 5 numbers of the sequence, and then its mirror is another string of 5 numbers. And the beginning string is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and the next set would be 9, 9, 8, 7, 5. And when you add those numbers, their oppositions always reduce to 10 in this case, when you use the 60 method. And all that is just using the last number. It doesn't matter what the number is. All they use is the very last number that is produced, and they disregard the rest of the numbers. But that, you know, doing so, you know, produces a different so-called root number, you know. But this produces a 10 in its opposing numbers, and I mean, you know, I'm not saying that's a wrong. I'm not saying that method is wrong. I'm just saying that we've seen in this series of videos that a lot of the structures that do have a foundation of 10, there's a lot of flaws and problems with them, as we saw with the true tree of life, the true tarot cube, and a few other constructs that have a 10 as a root like that. So I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it's kind of suspect at this point. But the other way, the way that follows the single digit code of reducing the numbers, is producing all this over here and this. And I'll get to this in a minute. This is actually, I can't believe I haven't touched on this yet, because this is amazing. But I need to lay the framework for what's going on, and it's taking, you know, a little bit more time than usual. So, and also what happens is on this last row, when you combine these 2 rows together, they are mirrored on both sides. And both of the numbers in between these 9s add up to 144, but each string is mirrored. So it goes, the same number sequence shoots up this way as this way. It's completely mirrored in one set. And it gives you 144 mirrored. That's why I say that. It's just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So now let me get to, one last thing about this, about the framework, about the prepping framework. Down here where you see the code and the zeros and X's, the reason I left those dots in there is because that's actually an important part of the code. Because what it shows is the spaces, the numbers in between the dots are 9 in total. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait. Yeah, 9 numbers in between the dots, and then you got one number, one figure for each set outside the dot. So that makes a total of 18, which of course reduces to 9 for 2 sets. And then you got 4 figures outside of the dots. And if you remember from the Osiron tarot spiral, the very bottom of the numbers when you add the cards shows a 9, and the very top of the spiral is a 4 when it's reduced. And we see that here. We get 9 interior numbers, a 9 reduced, and then for the upper it's 4, and that equals of course 13. And 13 shows its face a lot, and 13 is powerful, but it just kind of sneaks in there a lot. But 13 is powerful. 13 is the death card, and all that. Okay, now let's get to the main show here. what you see in this circle here is basically how this code, the pulse of creation, applies to a circle, in this case using 72 numbers. Okay, and 72 numbers gives you an even set of 6 segments of the code. Okay, but if you recall, this code can also work as a single unit, and it takes 30 of these units to form a 360-degree circle. Okay, and you can use any amount in between. That's the difference. I mean, you can drop this to 60, you can use 24, you can use 48, whatever you want. This is completely fractal. It extends from 1 to 30 completely, and it's the same congruent code in every form, in every facet. The reason I'm using 72 is because this number code tells you to use 72, but with its numbers, 72 and 27. This is telling you to use that number, so I did. And what happens when you do that is each segment of a course is 12. In the circle, it produces 6 zeros. You got 1 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it also uses 6 key ones. And there's a difference between these ones and every other one that I'll get to in a second. And these ones are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The zeros are represented by the pi section, and the ones are represented by the hexagonal construct that goes around. And those two numbers are the prime numbers in the code. You see the 0 here, and then it jumps to a 1 and descends to a 0. Well, that's what those numbers represent. 0, the 1, and then back to 0 again. And this goes around 6 times for this construct. But there's another number that shows its face that is showing a pretty powerful role to play too. And the only reason I really noticed that was because to build this thing, this is a huge circle, and I had to draw it with markers. So while I had to try to figure out how I was going to make this thing symmetrical using just markers and my skill, you know what I mean? So in doing so, it taught me how to construct it and make it symmetrical and even and make it look good. So how I did that was, first I established this 0 and this 0, okay? So I knew that was going to be basically the middle. Then I established this one and this one, okay? And that gave me a basic quadrant shape. And then, so now I noticed that in the dead center between this 0 and this 1, there's an even amount of numbers, 8, and then the dead center number is always a 2, okay? So then that helped me narrow it down more so I could make everything symmetrical. So I established the zeros and these ones, and then I established this 2, that 2, and that 2, and that separated it into quadrants of 8. And then I was able to fill in the rest evenly and make it look good. But that 8 quadrant isn't an accident. That's a pretty important part of this. Because then the 2's again, see, what this is showing you is that between the 0 and the 1, the 2's will always be in the dead center. And the 2's are what happen when you create a 0 and a 1. When you create a 0 and a 1, that gives you 2 states, as I've explained in other videos. And this 0 and this 1, in the dead center of that is 2. And then, now, once you do that, I was able to establish better points of reference for the other numbers. In between this 0 and this 1 in the single set, the 2 again is in dead center. And what allows that to happen is the fact that there's 2 1's here, and what those 1 and 1 represent is 0 movement again, but that allows the 2 to fall dead center. So what happens after you get rid of all of those key numbers, I have them written here as key numbers, 0, 1, and 2, every other number is left on its own. And then what happens is when you reduce those numbers, it turns into a code of 2 and 7, again from this thing directly. This is all within a single aspect of the code. That's why this is 72 and not 60 or 48 or any other number, because it's telling you to use 72. And what happens when you do that is you get a code. I'll start from the top. If you section it in 8s, it goes 277, which is dumb, which reduces to form a 7. Then it goes 227, which reduces to give an overall 2 when you separate it into 8s like that. But what happens when if you isolate it to each segment of the 6 from 0 to 0, what happens is it shows a code that is 2772, and it's always that. It's always 2772, 2772, 2772, and those numbers combine to reduce to 9. So each segment of 6 reduces to 9. And what else happens in one of these segments is all of the numbers between the prime 0 and 1s, all of the numbers combine and reduce to 11. That's why there's an 11 in each of these little sections up here, because that's what the numbers between the 1 and 0 reduce to. Okay, and then you got 2 in one of these constructs is 2 11s to form 22. So basically what the numbers, all these numbers in one section is, because all we have to really focus on with this is just one section, because one section is the exact same as every other section, and they fractalize from 1 up to 30 for a 360-degree circle. So, and it obviously keeps going, and you can keep going as big as you want. But so basically the 9 is derived from the numbers, the 2772 combo. The 12 is derived from the fact that the very root code itself is 12. The 22 is derived from the numbers that all the numbers between the 0, 1, and 0 form 22, separated into even groups of 11 and then 11. So that's what this wheel is. This wheel is showing you how this is a completely symmetrical wheel that uses this sort of refined code of Fibonacci called the pulse of creation. That's what that is. And this pulse of creation, I first showed this, actually in the very first video that started all of this was Proof of God 1, when I didn't even have this dry erase board or markers or anything. I just had a little white piece of paper trying to explain this. As a matter of fact, I may remake that video using the board here, because it's still a powerful video, but I just was using a little white piece of paper with drawn ink figures on it. And this is where this pulse of creation code was first revealed to me in that. And then I sort of, I've mentioned it a couple of times in other videos before now, but I haven't really focused on it in this sort of way, because I have a new friend on Facebook. He's a guy who has work that dates back to 2013. I can't think of his name offhand, but his work goes back to 2013. But his work uses the 60 model. Most of his work, if not all of it, uses the code of the 60 model, and he doesn't use the reduced method. As far as I know, he may use the reduced method too, but I just didn't notice it in the work that he shared. But it's pretty good work. I wish I could think of his name. Something Lucian, something like that. He's an Asian guy, but so I was inspired to do this work by that when I saw his work. The only thing I didn't like was the fact that how they derive their code of 60, because I like to reduce all the numbers. I want the true code, and when you use a single digit code, that is the absolute true code, because that reduces to once you reduce those numbers, that is the single digit code. And all of my work is based on the single digit code, and the prime formula for that is reducing any number that exists. It doesn't matter how big the number is. Any number, every number, it doesn't matter how big, will always reduce to either 1 through 9. That's it. And the reason you get the zeros in this, because if it was just reducing the numbers, then you would never get a 0, because 0 would never show up in that case. The reason you get zeros, these zeros again only mean 0 movement when you filter the Fibonacci code through the vortex math wheel to produce the pulse of creation code. And that 0 isn't really 0, it just means 0 movement. That's all it means in this case. So, let's see what we got here. See if I have anything more to add. I think I covered most everything here. But this is amazing. This is showing the symmetry of the single-digit code. This is showing Fibonacci and how Fibonacci applies to the single-digit code. This is, in this beautiful construct here, fractalizes out from 1 unit of 12 all the way to infinity, and you'd never have to stop. I mean, the only thing you'd be stopped by was the fact that we, in a circle we use 360. So in this case, I guess the limit would be 30 before you start getting redundant. Okay, but the unit itself, each unit, this one pie shape with the single code of 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 0 is complete unto itself, and it plugs in to other units to infinity, and it will always produce the same code. So these 2s and 7s and all that aren't contingent on other segments. They do it all by itself. This 2772 code is 1 unit, and it is contained within itself. 2772 produces 11, then 22, and 7, 12, and 9. All these numbers are key, powerful numbers. Again, 7 is a huge number, and I've showed that in a lot of other videos. That 7 is the fluids of the body. That's where Kundalini enters first in the body and saturates your body. So I think that's it. Thank you, and namaste.